Hi, I'm Kristin Omdahl and welcome back to my studio. In this video, I want to show you some tips and tricks for knitting the Zoe Knit Cowl. This project is worked in the round in a beautiful offset textured pattern that is a seamless one-ball project. It's perfect for a special ball of yarn or a last-minute gift. You'll need one ball of my Be So Brave gradient yarn, which is 100% American Merino wool, number 4 worsted weight. Each one of these is dyed in 2 colors for a gradient, where you can see here it changes from one color to the other one time throughout the ball. When you download your pattern or your book, this pattern is available as a single download, or you can order it as part of the Layers Knit book. When you see the pattern, it's going to explain a few things in the beginning. For starters, it'll tell you how much yarn you'll need and what weight yarn you'll need if you're going to substitute your yarn. Or you'll see that I use the Be So Brave gradient yarn. It'll also tell you what size knitting needles you'll need. I used a US 10 or 6mm set of circular knitting needles for this project. You'll also need a yarn needle and scissors, and optional is to use a stitch marker. Your gauge is listed here and your finished size. If the finished size is not important to you, then the gauge doesn't matter. If finished size is important to you, then the gauge absolutely matters. So you may want to do a gauge swatch to make sure that your gauge is the same as mine, and even need to adjust your needle up or down accordingly. We have a stitch guide here that tells you what stitches you're going to need for this project. Knit, purl, yarn over, knit 2 together, SSK, S2KP. Most of these are pretty standard, and I'll go over them in the tutorial. But the one stitch that is not a standard stitch is the S2KP. So I wrote that one out here in the pattern as well. The other thing you're going to need to know how to do is a knit cast on. And I'll show you that. Well, first I want to show you that on the cowl. In order to get a nice stretchy cast on, I like to use a knit cast on. And it's just a really simple cast on technique that I'm going to show you. You're going to take your yarn and tie it into a slip knot. Let's do that a little slower. Wrap the yarn around your fingers. Wrap it a second time. Pull that loop through like that and tighten. Doesn't really matter how long your tail is for this particular type of cast on. The only thing you'll want to make sure is that you leave enough length for weaving in your loose end at the end. So we're going to move all of this to our left hand so that we can begin by knitting into that slip knot, wrapping the yarn around the needle, pulling a loop through. Now if we were actually knitting, we'd be dropping this loop off and moving this to the right hand needle. But we're knitting casting on, so we're going to leave that loop on our left hand needle and add this new loop to our right hand needle. So that makes the slip stitch count as our first cast on stitch, and this loop here our second cast on stitch. I'm going to knit into this new stitch, but instead of dropping this and transferring this stitch to the right hand needle, we're going to slide that one back to the left hand needle too. So now we're growing our number of stitches on the left hand needle with this knit cast on technique. The stitch pattern calls for a multiple of 12 stitches, and the actual cowl has a cast on of 84 stitches. Just so you know, this is a reduced size sample just for the tutorial. I'm not casting on all of the stitches for the cowl, but you will get the gist of it either way. So now that I've cast on my stitches, I want to make sure that I slide my stitches all the way around, evenly around my circular knitting needle. Okay, because now we're going to start working in the round. And what you want to make sure is that this spine, or the edge of the cast on, is all facing in the same direction. So I've got mine facing towards the center of our circle, and you want to make sure that it's not twisted. I'm going to twist it really quickly so you can see what you don't want it to look like. See how that spine twists around there? You want to make sure that that's not happening. So we're going to make sure that that spine's all facing towards the center before we continue working in the round. So you want to have your needles positioned with the working yarn on the right hand side, your spine to the center, and this is where you would add a stitch marker if you're going to add one. We're going to slide our stitch marker right onto our needle. And now some people like to join in the round in a number of different ways. You can either knit this stitch together with this one and then knit them together and then knit 2 times into the next stitch, or you can cast on an extra stitch so that you can decrease at the join. I don't have a problem with just knitting each stitch. If I feel like there's a gap in the next round, I just tighten those stitches accordingly. And so now I'm just going to purl into that first stitch. We're going to move our yarn to the front and purl into each stitch around. This particular pattern calls for a garter stitch border, and garter stitch means something totally different whether you're working in rows or rounds. Working in rounds, garter stitch is alternating rounds of purl and knit, whereas in rows of knitting, garter stitch means knit every row. So you want to follow your pattern to see how many rounds of garter stitch you need for your edge, and then I'll show you how to get started in the lace stitch pattern. I've just completed that second setup round where we purled all the way around, and this is a really important time to check and make sure your stitches aren't twisted still, because if they are twisted at this point, this is where you can really go wrong in a pattern that's in the round. So you just want to double check that everything's going in the same direction like that. What you don't want to see is this twisted around on itself like that. So you just want to double check that, and at this point, if there's too much of a gap between the beginning and end of your round, you can pull a little extra snug on your stitches to get them to close up that gap between where you joined into the round. And we're going to knit every stitch on our next round. That's the second component to garter stitch in the round. All of the rounds of the lace stitch pattern start with an asterisk, and what that means is that you're going to repeat from the asterisk around. This will take up 12 stitches, which is the 12 stitch repeat, and then you're going to repeat this pattern for the remainder of the round. So let's start with round 1. So we're going to start with a knit 2, yarn over, knit 2, and then we do an S2KP, slip 2 stitches to the right hand needle. We're going to slip them both together, then knit the next stitch, and then pass those 2 slip stitches up and over the stitch we just knit. So it's a double decrease. Knit 2, yarn over, and knit 3. Okay, so now we're going to repeat that whole sequence of stitches around. So I'm going to say it again. It's a knit 2, yarn over, knit 2, S2KP, slip the next 2 stitches to the right hand needle, knit the next stitch, then grab those 2 slipped stitches and pass them up and over the knit stitch and off the needle. It's a double decrease. Knit 2, yarn over, knit 3. Okay, we've done our repeat a second time, and we're going to repeat that all the way around. In order to maintain the beautiful stockinette base to this stitch pattern, we're going to work round 2 and all even numbered rounds with just knit around. And that means knitting every stitch and knitting every yarn over, knit every stitch around. The repeat for round 3 is knit 1, yarn over, knit 2, SSK. We're going to slip one stitch to the right hand needle, then slip a second stitch to the right hand needle. Notice I did them separately. Then take our left hand needle and insert it into both of those slip stitches, then knit them together. And this creates a left slanting decrease. Knit one. Then we're going to work a knit two together, which means we're going to insert our right hand needle into the next two stitches on the left hand needle and knit them together. This creates a right slanting decrease. Knit two, yarn over, knit two. And that's our repeat for this round. I'll show it to you one more time. Knit one, yarn over, knit two, slip, slip, knit, knit one, knit two together, knit two, yarn over, knit two. And you want to repeat that all the way around. Refer to your pattern for rounds 5, 7, and 9. They will be a different sequence of stitches than we did on rounds 1 and 3, but they'll ultimately be the same stitches. So everything you've learned so far will be sufficient for doing those rounds. The only other thing that's a little bit different is on round 11. Because of the nature of the offset stitch pattern that we're doing, working this offset pattern in the round, we will need to move our stitch marker one place on every repeat of round 11. So round 11 begins with remove the stitch marker, knit one, and then replace the stitch marker. And then you will repeat everything in from the asterisk as you repeat throughout that round. You'll want to repeat rounds all the way through 64, and then I'm going to show you how to bind off all the stitches. If you prefer to follow a chart than written instructions, you can see that we have a chart here. Make sure that you refer to the key to know what each of these symbols mean, and know that the chart is worked from this side across to that side as we're working in the round. So you'll want to repeat everything that you see on this chart. That will be the same thing as repeating from the asterisk on the written instructions. Next, I'll show you how to bind off. So when it's time to bind off, you're going to remove your stitch pattern and knit two stitches. Then with your left hand needle, pick up the second stitch and pull it up and over the first. Knit the next stitch. Pick up the stitch to the right hand side of that stitch and pull it up, over, and off the needles. And you've bound off a second time. And you want to do this all the way around. Notice that I'm not pulling my yarn taut as I do this. That's to keep the stitches nice and loose as I'm binding off. You'll see that's what the bind off edge will look like. Follow the links in the video description for more information on ordering Be So Brave gradient hand-dyed yarn, or for downloading your Zoe Knit Cowl pattern, or for pre-ordering the Layers Knit book. Let us make time to create, share, and inspire today and every day. I'll see you next time. Bye.